Hi everyone and welcome back to this week's WARNO Dev Blog once again on a Thursday. Today we are looking at the other side of the battle for Berlin with the Unternehmen Zentrum. Eugen start with a quick reminder at the top here, which is the two new previously undisclosed divisions will come as part of the Udenau milestone. The pair of battle groups will be free to all owners of the early access version of WARNO. They are Eugen's gift to all the players who got in early and helped develop the game and obviously helped support that development. So let's see how this East German and Soviet battle group would have fared in the Battle for Berlin in 1989. Unternehmen Zentrum, or Operation Center, was Warsaw Pact's secret plan to invade West Berlin and get rid of its pesky NATO defences. We have given the same name to Warno's battle group, with a mix of East German and Soviet forces specialised in urban warfare. The troops involved in the Battle for Berlin would have been drawn from two principal sources: the East German 1st Motorisierte Schützen Division, or the 1st Motorized Rifle Division, and the Soviet 6th Independent Guards Motorized Rifle Brigade. If you recall, each NATO ally was only allowed one brigade within the city's confines. The Soviets were likewise only able to deploy a single brigade in East Berlin. The East Germans, like the West Germans, were forbidden to deploy a single unit within the city. However, very much tough luck for NATO because they just deployed around the city's perimeter, providing forces for the main assault. While local NATO defenders in West Berlin didn't really pose a threat to the Warsaw Pact, being too weak to mount any offensive or breakout, this outpost was still a major inconvenience in the eyes of the political and military leadership. As such, in the case of World War III, West Berlin would have been cleared as soon as possible to remove the pesky thorn in the side of the Soviets and East Germans. Over the years, these war plans were updated with the latest real-life examples originating from the late 80s. The next subheading is a bit more context. All of these secret plans were destroyed, but enough documentation and interviews with former NVA officers after Germany's reunification paint a very realistic picture of how the Battle for Berlin would have unfolded, from a Warsaw Pact's point of view at least. Only the two last versions have been reconstructed: Unternehmen Stoss, Operation Thrust in 1986, and the latest variant, Unternehmen Zentrum, Operation Center from 1987. And you can see from the nice little map on the screen just how completely surrounded the NATO forces were. Now, these war plans were rehearsed during actual yearly military operations, with other East German cities earmarked as the training's objectives, although you could see that they were thinly veiled as West Berlin. These included targets identifiable as being proxies for Germany's historical capital and the three different NATO garrisons. The taking of West Berlin was to be done as quickly as possible. With the task accomplished through overwhelming firepower, the initial attack would have been airstrikes, followed by intense barrages of artillery fire, and East German paratroopers would have heli-dropped into West Berlin's two airports, while the Soviet brigade would surge out from the Brandenburg Gate, bisecting the city defenders. The first targets would have been the British, with the French and Americans mopped up later. At the same time, numerous axes of advance from around the city perimeter, mainly from the East German motorized riflemen, would start pressing on the West Berlin defenders from the outside. Resistance was expected to cease after 2 days, and clearing the NATO forces would take 2 more. The Warsaw Pact planners would have given the entire operation 3 to 4 days. They do actually post a link here to Operation Center, or a bit more reading on that if you're interested. I'll include the link down below in the description. Okay, let's get on to the really juicy stuff. The Unternehmen Zentrum detailed. The Unternehmen Zentrum would use the East German 1st Motorized Rifle Division and the Soviet 6th Independent Guards Motorized Rifle Brigade. A host of local forces as well as specialized formations were to assist in the operation. This included the entire Soviet 40th Artillery Brigade, positioned around West Berlin with its army-level heavy artillery and MRLS batteries. A serious amount of ordnance would also be dropped on West Berlin to aid its liberation. The Soviet 2nd Engineering Brigade for specialized support, including sappers and combat engineers. The 1st Battalion, FJB 40, of the elite East German Airborne with Special Forces Luftsturm Regiment 40, officially stationed to guard the Ministry of National Defence's sector. Its true purpose was to capture Tegel and Tempelhof airfields in a heli-borne assault. The Stasi, or the East German Dreaded State Security Service, featured an armed branch called the PACT Regiment. Trained as urban warfare specialists, these elite soldiers would be a force to be reckoned with. No less than 6 Grenzschutzen border guards regiments would also provide additional soldiers, keeping a vigilant eye on the Berlin Wall and the outer city limits in combat situations. They would first clear the comprehensive border obstacles, then advance on assault troops' flanks to secure them. These units could also call on their own artillery regiment. 3 battalions of East German paramilitary police, the Kasernierte Volkspolizei, contributed to the operation. Lightly armed, they had access to a few World War II guns. And our East German paramilitary friends, the Kampfgruppen der Arbeiterklasse, combat groups of the working class, would also be called up to take part. So I think what Eugen are basically saying here is that they would have everything but the kitchen sink, and the kitchen sink here being an armoured brigade from the Russians. So what units can you expect in-game? Well, logistics, much like NATO's counterpart, the Unternehmen Zentrum, can count on a well-stocked logistics category with a large quantity of supply and command units available from both East German and Soviet sources. Infantry-wise, the division relies on copious amounts of infantry choices, ranging from amateur soldiers such as the VPB Police or the KDA Militia to elite German FS Jäger squads. Regular Motsuchen and Motorstrelki and the associated weapon teams with recoilless rifles, ATGMs and HMGs are also available. Soviet Sapri can be deployed in greater numbers than usual. The special feature of the division is the presence of the dreaded Wachzuchen. Hard-hitting squads, lavishly equipped and expertly trained for urban warfare, they come in 3 different flavours with a mix of Scorpion SMGs, brand new STG 941s and 942 assault rifles, satchel demolition charges, Strela 2M manpads, and even a few RPO Rise thermobaric launchers, courtesy of their Soviet comrade in arms. There's a lovely picture here in the background which they've kindly posted, showing the very wide selection of infantry they have access to. I mean, there's a lot there, let's be honest. But things only expand from there, in all honesty, with artillery. The king of the battlefield is very well represented in the Unternehmen Zentrum, with a wide array of pieces, calibers and tubes. Soviet and East German artillery would combine their overwhelming firepower to lay waste to Berlin. Heavy guns are available, most of them towed, as if counter-battery artillery fire would be much of a problem anyway, but these range from 120mm mortars, 122mm, 130mm, 152mm howitzers, and the only real self-propelled gun is the Soviet 2S1. The rather unusual and venerable Grenzschutzen ZIS-3 dual-purpose artillery piece, year of introduction 1942, also makes an appearance. A decent artillery and AT gun suitable for warfare from a previous era rather than this one. Rocket launchers include the East German RM-70, napalm-equipped BM-21, as well as the ever-delightful Uragan. No target other than West Berlin would have been more worthy than the addition of the Soviet Army's latest mass-killing machine, the mighty TOS-1 Buratino. Basically, they're getting everything including the kitchen sink when it comes to artillery. In terms of tanks, an average category in terms of cost and numbers available, although unit selection is rather diverse. The 1st Motorized Rifle Division could only count on the older T-55 and T-55 AM2 tanks, and anti-tank forces will also include the BRDM-2 and PAC 100mm guns. The Soviet Brigade had their share of T-64 tanks. For reasons unknown, by 1987 a handful of T-80s could also be found in its armoured arsenal. Oh well, there you go, it's got some T-80s as well. Maybe they did bring the entire kitchen sink. No good piece of equipment should go to waste, including the decidedly vintage World War II ones. East German militia and police forces fielded the timeless T-34/85 and the ZIS-2 57mm anti-tank gun, the latter unit being short-range and firing only AP high-velocity rounds, no HE. It won't be a threat to a modern main battle tank, but could still wreak havoc on an APC or IFV, thanks to its high accuracy and rate of fire. Recon, like its NATO counterpart, there was not much need for dedicated reconnaissance troops in the battle for Berlin. Enemy concentrations and defensible positions should have been well known, and typical choices of the BRDM-2, Aufklärer and Motorrazvedka are featured, as well as the light Grenzer squads. Anti-air is a rather strong category for the division. The Warsaw Pact forces put a concerted effort in to deny enemy Western aircraft from leaving the city after the outbreak of World War III. Any fleeing plane would have been shot down within seconds of taking off, with a prominent belt of AA defences also pointed outwards to prevent any NATO aircraft flying from West Germany and assisting. From manpads to Strela 10 and the Buck M1, AA units are plentiful and potent. Helos is not one of the most powerful categories. West Berlin is not really helicopter friendly, with plenty of opportunity to be shot down in the congested urban terrain. This means a limited amount of East German Mi-24D anti-air choppers, and of course some Mi-8s flying top cover for the paratroopers which would be attacking West Berlin's airport, further backed up by a handful of Soviet Mi-24 VPs. In terms of the air forces, ground-pounding aircraft make up most of the units. These include the Su-17, the Su-24M4 attack planes from both East Germany and Soviet air forces. Plenty of air-to-ground munitions would be available, from 240mm rockets to the UPK pods 80mm rocket combos, and lacking any perceived NATO air threat, fighter cover was limited to a couple of MiG-23 ML fighters. With a host of infantry options backing up solid artillery and air defense units, the Unternehmen Zentrum is a hard-hitting division destined to slog it out in the brutal house-to-house combat. Operations in tight urban terrain are where the battle group excels, but it can still hold its ground thanks to its decent armoured and airborne forces. While numbers are impressive, vintage and obsolete equipment, as well as reserve and lightly armed troops, fill up the Unternehmen Zentrum's ranks. Next we get a brief update on the next patch that is coming to WARNO. Before we leave you, there is some news on the next WARNO patch. We originally planned to release the update this week, but as it happens the calendar played against us and the earliest possible release date would have been today, but since Friday, November 11th is a bank holiday in France, commemoration of World War I's armistice, we decided to release next week instead. If not, it would have meant releasing a major patch before a 3-day weekend with no way for us to monitor and hotfix any issues. And as this is a big update bringing destruction mode, HMG teams and a host of new features and improvements, the autocannon overhaul included, and a lot of balance changes, we really didn't want to take the chance. That's why we will deliver the patch to the strike team first, who will be allowed to stream for the upcoming long weekend, barring any major bug or issue reports. We will release the patch next week. And the NDA on that patch drops at 8 PM this evening Paris time, so please do check back on the channel then, as I will have some kind of preview video up by that point, and hopefully we'll be able to play some games with other members of the strike team over the next few days live on stream, and you can see some of these new units and things in action. They do leave us with a little video which is basically the new helipad. I believe this is a replacement for the helicopters in terms of what would usually be the hangar. So I'll leave that running in the background. I hope they don't mind me pulling that and popping it in here. You can also check it out on the official Eugen YouTube channel. As ever, I'm going to include a couple of shots from the official Instagram page of Eugen Systems. This here is the F117 Nighthawk, invisible but not invulnerable. As you can see, it has been hit by a missile. Next up, we get a shot of the British FV432 armed with a very nice Radan cannon. Obviously, this is a special unit for the Berlin Brigade. And then finally we have this lovely shot of the center of Berlin, I assume, with those two jets flying over with a lot of flames going on there. I'm assuming that's a lot of napalm. And that is everything for this week, guys. Thanks very much for watching. Please do like, share, subscribe. Stay tuned to the channel. We will be having some preview of the next patch later this evening and over the weekend, so please do stay tuned for that. And either way, have a great weekend, everyone.